I say this all the time, but you have to incentivize the behavior you want to see. People do what you pay them to do. The problem is for so many product organizations is they haven't figured out what their direct impact is to revenue. I see this all the time, right? It's easy for sales teams to say, okay, well, I know my business impact because it's a revenue number. CS, same thing. I can impact retention. I can impact growth. Awesome. Even you can impact and influence advocacy, which we know drives pipeline, which also contributes to that. Great. There's tons of things you can tie those teams to. Marketing, same thing, right? Leads, easy. Product teams struggle to understand their business impact. And when I say business, put dollar signs there. That's what I'm talking about. They don't understand the correlation to that. But I will tell you, if I looked at all my reports, I can easily tell you how much money I've lost due to product and even specifically what parts of our product, whether it's a gap, it's an issue with something, something's broken, it's a bug. I can quantify all of that. I can also tell you how much new revenue I've generated because of new product innovation and new product development. So for me, it's easy peasy, right? I can't sell what doesn't exist. I also can't retain on something that's broken. Our customers buy products. They're not buying services.
Welcome to the Product Tea with Leah. I am your host, Leah Tarin, and we are about to spill the tea with the best from tech about product, growth, and senior leadership topics. Good morning, everyone. What better way to start your day than with customer success strategies in the fast-paced world of B2B SaaS and a cup of tea? As the Chief Customer Officer at Client Success, she's one of the go-to experts for companies looking to redefine their approach to customer engagement, ensuring every client not only stays, but thrives. With over a decade of leadership under her belt at tech frontrunners like BrightEdge and BetterCloud, she has honed an uncanny ability to amplify retention rates and drive revenue through the roof. When she's not architecting the next big breakthrough in customer success, she can be found sharing her deep well of knowledge at industry conferences or penning insights that are gold for any customer-centric professional. Welcome to the Product Tea, the gold medalist of customer experience, Kristi Faltorusso. How are you doing this morning?
I'm so good. Wow. I was like, can you copy and paste that intro to me? Because that is better than anyone that I've ever done for myself.
You are not the first person to ask. Of course I can do that. Absolutely. That's what we do with the Product here.
Whoa. Wait a second. I was like, I am so impressive.
Yeah, the only reason why I go on other podcasts is to hear introductions of other people, because one of the most fundamental needs that we have as people is actually what do other people think about us, right?
Right.
That's what it is. I'm the CIO. I'm the Chief Intro Officer. Kristi, did I forget anything? Can you introduce yourself for the unlucky people that do not know you yet?
Oh my gosh. Well, first, I'm so excited to be here. No, listen, you nailed a lot of things. I like to talk about my career, though, in Act 1 and Act 2, because what people don't realize is that I spent a decade of my career in marketing before I broke into customer success. And so I think it's important because folks that have been in customer success for a long time don't come from these traditional pathways. Like you weren't always in customer success. So I like to talk about my background because I'm a marketing first customer success leader, which I do think contributes to my ability to do my job really well. So outside of that, I think you nailed everything. Thrilled to be here. I'm excited for our conversation.
Yeah, that sounds really good. And before we jump into this, what do people get wrong about you once they get to know you?
Okay, listen, I think there's a lot of things people get wrong about me, but the one I think the most is people think that I'm an extrovert. People see me and they're like, oh my gosh, you're so extrovert. I'm definitely not. I'm the biggest introvert that people would never suspect. I don't get energy from engaging with people. I get energy scrolling on TikTok by myself, petting my dog. Like that's where my energy comes from.
I can totally relate to that, unfortunately, because about 40 or 50% of all the guests say exactly the same. It's like the entire world has been created for extroverts. Also, we're getting along, but I'm also an introvert, right? Like, it's like, maybe because we're not people. We're transcendent. That's why, right? So I don't know what it is. Okay, enough of the self-praise. Kristi, I'm very sorry to hear that you had to go into marketing at some point in your life, but it can happen, right? So
accidents happen.
Yeah, I also was in darker periods or like in darker silos in my life. None of them was marketing. But okay, I'm very glad that you've seen the light now. So you're talking a lot about customer success, and customer success is a function as well, right?
Yep.
So like I have the word customer success a lot in my slides when we talk about product-led growth. How should we get people to value and so forth? And just today I also recorded a video on this. I'm like, hey, how should we structure onboarding and how do we think about product-led growth? And in my opinion, it is always about like, how can we get the customers as fast as possible to value without rushing the customer, right? Or like the prospect or the user or whatever you want to call it. Now, You could say that we are antagonists, right? Because I'm saying that you should do everything self-serve, which is not true, but like I'm just claiming it right now. We should do everything self-serve. And you're saying that all your dirty customer success agents with their dirty little fingers are onboarding the clients, right? So what is this customer success supported onboarding that you are talking about quite a lot?
Okay, so here's the reality. It's going to look different at every company, right? I don't think that you need to be onboarded the same way if you're like using Calendly versus if you're using Salesforce, right? The spectrum there is super wide. So I think my challenge comes with folks thinking that the way you onboard a customer at one company is going to look the same at another company, or creating a model that looks the same for all of your customers. So that's the challenge that I have. And, listen, I've done it wrong a million times before I ever thought I got it right. So I've learned from my mistakes. But what I have found that is the more time we figure out who our customers are and where they're starting from, and having a framework you can build off of, but one that's flexible enough to get your customers to that value, however they're defining it, is going to be key. And I think that's the bigger thing, though, is how your customers are defining value, not how you're defining value. I see too many companies going, oh, well, we need the customer to go do these 5 things. And if they do these 5 things, oh, they've made it. I will tell you, your customer doesn't give a shit about those 5 the right? They care about the one thing that they need it to do for them in that short period of time. If you get them to their one thing, you'll have far more success than if you get them to your 5 things. And that's the challenge.
I'm very glad that you attached now the last part to this as well, because also in my experience, it actually is very helpful to understand like which moment do you want them to experience through whatever method that it is in the end. So we're talking about B2B onboarding here because the B2C peasants, they are not giving us enough money to be worth our time, of course, right? So we do not care about them. But if we're talking about this, there's an interesting discussion that I had quite a few weeks back as well. And it starts to kind of materialize also like how I change my material. And that is, if customer success for your company as a function is a differentiator to your product versus to what otherwise is in the industry, right? So like, hey, the people that we have help you actually make you not only understand the bugs that we have in the system, but also like the additional value, right? Like, so we make you more successful. We can also help you. So it's not just about upselling, it's just really making you more successful as a customer. Then there's an interesting question coming from this, right? So like, if this is part of your value proposition and you think that the customer should experience it, and now I'm coming around the corner and I say like, well, you should make a freemium that kind of demonstrates for free what makes you special, then we have a problem. Because usually in a freemium, we try to contain, it's a freemium software, right? Like you can use it unlimited with some usage limitations, but it's very hard to kind of demonstrate customer success as a differentiator inside of a freemium, right? So like this kind of free value that does not come together. What is your experience in terms of kind of deciding and also putting on your cross-functional hat in that sense, when to use customer success and when actually shouldn't you use customer success as a function of helping to onboard, to get more value and so forth, like, like maybe for the beginning journey of your customers?
Listen, I do think a big part of it is the product. If you've got an extremely customizable solution versus a product that is configurable. And I do use those 2 terms very specifically, right? Configuration is different than customization. So if you've got a very complex software, it is likely that your customers are going to need somebody. I don't think that you're going to have the simplicity of being like, listen, go on this self-guided journey and here's some knowledge-based articles and some videos and best of luck to you. It's going to need more than that because of the complexity of the software. So I think complexity plays a part in that. Now, taking that off the table and saying, listen, 2 softwares, I want to have this kind of experience where they can do it by themselves. I've seen technology evolve so much so that you can actually embed things into that workflow. I do believe that the value of people is the consultative approach to customer success. My team is not here teaching my customer, click this button and do this thing. I think products have come a long way and are pretty intuitive in that sense. And I think end users are more intuitive as we use more technology. But what the value add is getting your customers to think differently about how they're using your product to achieve the goals that they set out. My team, they are subject matter experts. So I work at Client Success. We are a customer success management platform. My CSMs and the folks that onboard our customers are former customer success leaders. So they're working with our customers to give the added value of, hey, have you thought about doing it like this? Or at other companies or our other customers are doing X, Y, and Z. Have you considered that? Or would that be a better approach? That level of consultation is the real value that your human capital is going to be able to add. If you've got a product that's simple enough to use, then guess what? Click here, do this, build that. That's straightforward. But you can also think about adding the added value of that consultative approach and embedding it. I don't know. I've seen so much cool technology layered into products these days that the experience actually can be there without the additional humans. So I think it just really depends on what it is that you're trying to create for your customers.
So I don't disagree, but I would like to become a little bit more concrete in this, right? So like what we're talking about here is something that usually comes at scale, right? Like customer success usually does not exist like very, very early stage and so forth. So we're really talking here about scale ups and so forth. So there's an interesting thing happening when we talk about customer success. And also, I'm going to also like use a little bit interchangeably, a little bit also customer support, because they sometimes also like overlap a little bit, right? Like, I mean, hey, why can I not just ask Kristi already when I have her on the phone about this particular thing and so forth? There's a little bit of a shitty habit emerging in sales-led companies that they use customer success and support to cover for inconsistencies inside of the product where the interface is just shit and nobody really wants to work on it. Nobody really wants to fix it, specifically the onboarding, right? So like, let's say something funny, right? Like let's shit a little bit on Salesforce again. So Salesforce looks absolutely ugly, right? Like nobody wants to work with this product unless they already know it. Like it's kind of like a chicken and egg problem, right? Like you have to mandate people to kind of learn it. And there's a couple of reasons why this is the case, but their customer success and the salespeople as well and so forth, like whoever you have in this journey at the start, they've gotten really good in kind of like explaining all of these problems, not away, but, you know, like, hey, yeah, here's how you can do this, right? So you're kind of like training the hamster on something that should not be hard in the first place. How do you think about this in organizations that are relatively big? Because this is one of the big worries that I have as a typical CPO, that this kind of connection between customer success, because customer success in general does know very, very well why the customers churn, what they struggle with getting with onboarding, and what value that the product does not communicate really well. And that these three fingers that I'm holding up right now are a perfect roadmap. But so many companies are completely separate, right? Like if anything, customer success sits closer to sales than to product. And I think this is a big problem. What do you think about this?
I would absolutely agree. Listen, most of the companies that I work for in the B2B SaaS space are usually earlier to mid stage. So we're not talking, I don't work for companies that are thousands of people deep. So the silos don't exist to the extent that they would in a larger organization. Currently at Client Success, we're a small company. We're about 40 people, right? Our employees. I meet with my product team daily. My team meets with the product team daily. My product team meets with my customers regularly. So we don't have that same experience. But I will tell you, working at other companies, it did take a lot of work to break down those silos, but to help the product organization also see through data and customer conversations the experience that they were intentionally designing or not addressing. And so when we were able to correlate the direct kind of alignment between, hey, churn and revenue loss and our product experience, we were able to get more buy-in and get more support there. I'll tell you, I went on a campaign internally at a company that I worked for, and I called this campaign my 5 points of failure. And the reason why is because we had this experience and it was tied to payments, okay, that were built into our product, where we wanted our customers to be able to pay for their software subscription in our product. Well, guess what? We failed our customers 5 different times in our product for them to pay us. We were giving no value to them. So we would send them to something, it was broken, we'd redirect them, we'd send them to a person, that person would be like, no, we can't collect your payment information on the phone, so go back to this link, it didn't work. At the end of the day, the customer could not pay us, and we failed them 5 different times. So I use these real world examples to help the product organizations really understand and internalize the disservice that we do to our customers when we don't address these product gaps and issues. So it's finding things like that to get people to really understand. I will tell you, the next best powerful thing I can do is get my customers on calls with them or record calls and let them listen to it themselves. Hear what my team has to deal with all the time when we're trying to figure out hacky workarounds or explain our way out of product that just sucks. And I'll tell you, like, we end up being punching bags for crappy products all the time. And it sucks. It sucks to be on this end. But we have to be the product advocate, and we have to never position against the company. And we always have to be our biggest champion. And it's really difficult when you just have shitty product. So I don't know, from my standpoint, the best and biggest, strongest relationship I try to work on is that with my product organization. Because to me, listen, I can deal with misset expectations. I can deal with a customer that you sold that is not our primary ICP. All the things I have to deal with sales, I can navigate that, right? And at the end of the day, that's revenue. It is my job to figure it out. But product, Oh man, like that is more important than any other relationship because that makes or breaks everything about my team, including, forget just customer retention, employee retention. People don't want to work for companies with shitty products because we spend all of our time being beat up. We cannot do the things that we need to do. And our numbers are reflective of that. And so if you're holding your CS team accountable to retention and growth, and there's nothing to retain your customers on, and there's nothing to grow them on, bye.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I have like 4 different points on this one. So the first one is, I think, let's just start with what you just described, how this feels for the customer on the other side. They usually start to run into a problem. Either they do not know how to get through the onboarding or they have a bug or whatever. Customer doesn't care. Of course not, right? The customer tries to get in contact with you. So they will. So they call you. First person they actually talk to is first level support. Maybe if they're lucky, an actual person.
I was going to say, wait, are they getting a person? Because usually they're getting a bot.
Yeah. So, I mean, airlines actually have become better at this, right? Like, I'm actually glad when I can talk to a chatbot rather than just like Hamid somewhere in India that is just trying to explain me a Swiss product where I'm just like, yo, I don't need you right now. I mean, sorry. Anyway, so the thing is this, right? So like for the customer, it feels like, okay, they're getting handed off to the support. Then they probably have to describe the problem to an engineer. The engineer lacks every context in the entire thing. They have no idea what they're talking about, what they were trying to do. I cannot reproduce it. It gets handed off to customer success. And at this point, they are now with the third person in some kind of contact, sometimes like 2 by phone, one of them by email, which is like, the engineer and so forth. And then we have to decide, like, is this now a bug or is this a feature? Because we also want to qualify this correctly, right? Like inside of the system. And then we sometimes hope that something is going to happen with this. But it is exactly as you said as well, like in my experience, is that you need to drag this issue with the face and not with the ticket into the product organization in some kind of way to make this happen, because just shoving something into a backlog is not good enough, because the person that felt the frustration is not the same person that is afterwards dealing with the frustration. And this is also one of the reasons why I love product managers that actually came from customer success, because they have a very, very innate kind of feeling like, hey, I know how it feels. I know usually what the problems are, and they are very, very customer success focused because of this. Let me ask you 2 questions on this. So the first one is there some kind of tooling that you use to quantify how big the problems are that you're encountering inside of customer success? Are you just mishandling HubSpot for this, like every company, where you just say like, oh, like out of 500 prospects, well, like 200 of those cannot pay? Or do you not quantify the problems that you have? Or is it like, are you treating them more like on the qualitative side? Like what kind of tooling do you use to kind of put a dimension onto the problems?
Yeah, I think you need both. I think you need the qualitative and the quantitative. Honestly, I think the data needs to be presented first, then you need to have the stories to back it up. So when I was doing a kind of like 5 points of failure campaign, I talked about all the revenue that we weren't able to collect. And when we think about cash flow at an organization, that's everything. So when I was able to clearly say, hey, listen, we're leaving literally millions of dollars out there because these customers cannot pay us. And they are trying. They're trying to give us millions of dollars and we're saying no, thank you. So like that is an easy way to do it. But then when I actually talk about the experience, like, look, why don't you go through it? I loved this one though. I actually had someone from our product team. I'm like, go. Here's the experience. As an end user, I want you to go through this. I want you to click it. I want you to tell me by the 4th point of failure how frustrated you are. I want you to call our accounts receivable team and you talk to the person and have them tell you, sorry, I can't collect your payment information. Go click on this link. I'll email it to you. It's the same link you just had. It doesn't work. Like go through that. And I want you to internalize that pain. So I do think it needs to be qualitative and quantitative. Listen, I think the other thing that's important here, and you hit on this point, I just want to kind of circle back on it. There is a difference between multi-channel and omni-channel. And I do believe that in B2C, they get it right a lot more than in B2B. It's the ability to have that really fluid data flow so that everyone in the organization is seeing and hearing the same information, and we can manage that to the customer. We're never having to ask the customer the same thing twice, 3, 4 times. So being able to streamline that makes a big difference. There's a lot of tech out there that is doing that really well. I don't think B2B is adopting that as well as they should, but I will cheat and say, at Client Success, because we, drink our own champagne. I won't say we eat our own dog food because I'm just not into eating dog food, but we have all of our organization in the platform. So just think about it. If you're using a CRM or whatever you're using, if every single person in your company had access to data, the democratization of data, actually democratizing it, making sure that everyone has it, they can see it, they are educated on how to use it, and they are empowered to put it to work. That makes a big difference. And then lastly, I will tell you, we do have a product and client success. So I cheat a little bit. We have something called product signals. So what this allows us to do is at a customer level, be able to document any product issues. And then in our reporting, it basically feeds it back to product. They can see all of the issues. They can correlate them back to a multitude of customers. We can track it by revenue and business impact. And then the product team can layer in and say, okay, well, here's a level of effort, and they can slot it into the roadmap. So for us, it streamlines that entire conversation, but it does the two things. It puts the data behind it, and then we have the names and the faces with our customers along for that.
I really, really like this. You answered already a lot of questions. I was smiling really dumb when you said, like, you got worked up and you're like, oh, you're leaving money on the table. Why can they not pay us?
All the time. It's crazy.
No. I also get very worked up. So to the people who are listening to this, right? Like senior product leaders and senior product people. Okay. So the difference between you and Kristi is that Kristi goes into the room and says, like, you're leaving fucking money on the table. That's a language that CEOs understand. What product leaders oftentimes do is they say, like, oh, this is not best practice. Well, okay, cool. That's really, really nice. But like, that's not the same kind of thing, right? So I honestly think, and I think you said a lot of good things. So I don't think there is one tool where everybody can kind of consume the data out of. Because first of all, salespeople do not know how to interpret data. They also don't give a shit because it doesn't help them sell. Customer success usually always has access to all the systems, but they don't have time in the day to actually use all the systems.
You can't aggregate that all together into one easy place. A lot of data, limited insights. Let's put it that way.
Exactly. And the product people, they just have no idea how to do anything that is related to revenue. And what I mean with this is that I brought this example quite a lot of times. I think the solution to this entire problem, whatever we want to call it, is in a cross-functional planning process where all the silos are involved and where we say that, well, if you did not validate what you want to build right now with customer success, with sales, and with marketing at the same time, then get out of my office. I don't care how much you claim this makes. If the validation does not include the perspectives of these different silos and they're excited that you're actually doing this, you can just go right back. I don't care how good it sounds, right? And the problem why this does not happen, and by the way, this is how I make the majority of my revenue, right? Like I go in these companies, I kind of straighten out the organization and then I just go with it, is because we still think that the buyer goes through marketing, then they go to sales, and then they go to product. And customer success is somewhere over there because we do not want to bother the expensive AEs that we have over here. And it's not how the customer journey looks like anymore, not at all, right? So every time they go across one of these borders, like marketing campaign, and then they go into the onboarding of the growth team, and then they go into the product, the customer feels it every time. The problem that we did, I think, about 5 to 6 years ago or 10 years ago when we started to create cross-functional teams, really like in tech, where we really, really started to kind of embrace this concept is we stopped at product and engineering. What we should have done is we should have included customer success and bloody sales. This is just like incentivized on signature bonuses and so forth. I honestly think that this is the main problem that we have, and this is why this ends up in this way. I'm going to pause it for a second because I have another point that I want to make later on.
I say this all the time, but you have to incentivize the behavior you want to see. People do what you pay them to do. The problem is for so many product organizations is they haven't figured out what their direct impact is to revenue. I see this all the time, right? It's easy for sales teams to say, okay, well, I know my business impact because it's a revenue number. CS, same thing. I can impact retention. I can impact growth. Awesome. Even you can impact and influence advocacy, which we know drives pipeline, which also contributes to that. Great. There's tons of things you can tie those teams to. Marketing, same thing, right? Leads, easy. Product teams struggle to understand their business impact. And when I say business, put dollar signs there. That's what I'm talking about. They don't understand the correlation to that. But I will tell you, if I looked at all my reports, I can easily tell you how much money I've lost due to product and even specifically what parts of our product, whether it's a gap, it's an issue with something, something's broken, it's a bug. I can quantify all of that. I can also tell you how much new revenue I've generated because of new product innovation and new product development. So for me, it's easy peasy, right? I can't sell what doesn't exist. I also can't retain on something that's broken. Our customers buy products. They're not buying services.
I think all of this is true. And I mean, I also have to say in defense of product, product has the hardest sometimes outside of the growth teams, like to also put numbers on stuff that they actually are building. because a lot of the stuff has this validation like, oh, the CEO asked us to. We do not really know why, but we're just doing it right now. Or like Gary from sales has said like that we're going to close an account, $250,000, but the account never came, but we built it anyways. But here's a funny example that I think, because, I'm a little bit of a rebel. I piss a lot of people off in this industry, of course. So I always bring this example of, I grew up with learning that whatever functional KPIs you give, right? So like, hey, Kristi, you're going to be measured on this particular goal for the next quarter. Like you should have 100% control over the goals that I kind of give you. I actually stopped believing this because one of the problems that I had is that some of the other silos, specifically marketing, if you do not constantly whip them to come to your planning processes, and, like they have to spend like 2 hours a month with you or something, they're not going to do it. Why are they not doing it? Because usually the goals that they have, MQLs, like how many qualified leads that we have, like how many socks did we pass out on booths in some kind of marketing event, they do not need anyone else for this, right? Like they don't care for this because this is where they get in trouble. They don't get in trouble if they do not show up for a product planning because they can always say like, oh, well, product has not informed us, even though this is exactly what would happen. So what I'm starting to do is I'm starting to say, hey, you know what? How about we measure you on MQLs that go inside of the product? So like how many qualified leads of ICPs can you bring that actually also afterwards are interacting with the product and reach the aha moment that we have to find as a company is important? And how much dollars did we pay for it? And then they're losing their shit. And then they say, yeah, but Leah, you are so unprofessional. I cannot influence this. And I'm saying, yes, that's very good. Maybe you now care what product is doing. I don't know. In my head, it sounds like such a good idea. You could be so glad that I'm not a CMO.
Listen, I think it's difficult. All teams have it hard. And I don't like to oversimplify and say like, oh, it's easy for this team and this team just needs to do X, Y, Z. I know it's never that easy. And every team has their own levels of challenges and complexities. But I also just don't see this real desire to go and fix any of it either. It's like the issues exist and we just let them continue without a real effort to go and resolve anything, even like incrementally. Go fix one little thing that sucks about the way you and your organizations are working together right now. There just isn't that desire. Everyone's so caught up in their own like, oh, well, I've got these things to do and my issues and my problems and my things. And as leaders, we forget that we have to be business leaders first and then functional leaders. I think sometimes we lose sight of that.
No, I 100% agree. And I think, ironically, one of the best books in this regard is Team of Teams, in my opinion. This is really like how to understand how do you build an organization that is actually led from the bottoms up, where people actually care about whether the decisions that they make actually the most sense or not, right? And because this is what this is. Most of the time, this is a mistake of the CEO or like someone not knowing how to build an actual organization that does what it should be.
Yeah.
And then you have these funny all hands meetings where they just stand in front of everyone and say like, you need to care about the customer more. I don't want to see all of this garbage that has been happening because of the organization that I've built, right? And they're just like, yeah, we're going to end up in that kind of four corner. I don't know. Well, it is what it is. So, Kristi, like, short question to you. What are typical KPIs that you feel like a modern customer success organization in B2B should be measured on? Aside from like, okay, so you said churn and you said retention. But what are more kind of practical things? Or can you give examples on things that you feel like, hey, like this makes sense to kind of for a customer success organization to focus on a quarterly basis, for instance?
So it's interesting. The things that we focus on, obviously there's a difference between the lagging and the leading indicators, right? So everything you just rattled off, those are lagging indicators. It is really hard to influence those in the short term. If we're thinking retention, we're thinking churn. Those two things, to move points on either of those takes time, especially if you're working in an organization with multi-year contracts, right? So you might have a customer who's there for 3 years. Great, that's wonderful. You're not going to renew them this year. So measuring retention is not an easy thing to be focused on. So you've got to figure out what are the leading indicators. Every organization, I think, does have to have specific KPIs that correlate back to their business. Because again, you have to be able to do the right things. For us, we have some simple ones. We have a couple milestones that we track against the customer journey that are critical to our success. The first one is simple. Do we have a clear and confirmed SMART goal with our customers? And I'm very specific about being a SMART goal. The problem is you can't manage what you can't measure. If your customers do not have clarity around how they're defining success, how can we say this customer has been successful? So it's almost as simple as getting them to articulate it. And the number one challenge there is your customers don't know what they don't know, and getting them to be clear on what their goal is. They know they have a pain, but being able to put metrics around that is not easy. So that is something that we focus on with our customers. The next is progress towards that. We are maniacal about tracking towards customer goals, not arbitrary things like, oh, did we have 10 calls with a customer this month? To be honest with you, who gives a shit? If I talk to my customer 10 times and they're not getting value or they're not progressing in the product, who cares? It's a waste of everyone's time. If I had one call with my customer and my customer is getting a ton of value from the product and they love the partnership and we have thoughtful, engaging conversations that are strategic in nature, great. So the problem is, like, a lot of these organizations, you're measuring the wrong things. Activities are not the same. You can't be tracking things like you would with an SDR for your customer success team. So
No.
focus on the goal for us. The next is the progress towards that. Like I said, we've got process in place and in our platform that allows us to track, literally, are we making progress there? So we look for those things. We do look for executive participation in the partnership. That looks very different. I do not force my customers to do EBRs and QBRs. I think that that's shit. Who am I to tell somebody they need to give me an hour of their time so that I can talk about my roadmap and I can talk about our company? Who cares? For us, when we think about executive participation, do they ever show up to any of the calls? Are they engaged, right? Can I get them on a call? Are they acknowledging value? So we've got different little ways that we think about executive participation in the partnership. And those are things that we value because we just want to know that there is a senior leader in your organization that cares about the work we're doing. That is more important to us. We want them to be able to acknowledge that we are solving a problem for your business and confirm that we are in fact doing it, right? That we can and we are. Those two things are critical to our success. So we look at things like that. Those are some of the leading indicators. I won't rattle off a bunch of them because honestly, they're all very specific to client success. But those are some examples of things that we focus on to make sure that we're progressing the partnership in the right way. We know that if we do all of these types of things, we've got things like our platform success audit. We know when we do this analysis for our customers, they have a higher likelihood of engagement and stronger adoption. So we know that there is an outcome that directly correlates to these activities as opposed to bullshit like, do they have a good health score? Do they engage? Do they give me a positive NPS? Like, all those things are horseshit. And if those are the things that you're managing, it's no wonder why your customers are churning. It is no wonder your customers are churning. So I don't look at those things. Those things don't matter to me. They don't matter to my customers. Those are internal, arbitrary, industry nonsensical things that people pay attention to because somebody somewhere once said 20 years ago, oh, this matters. And nobody thought about gut checking that.
Not only that, they said like, I wonder how we could figure out how happy this person is.
Oh gosh. I don't know about you, but one day I'm happy, the next day I'm not happy. And I don't think that my happiness has any bearing on anything.
No, this is like you go to your husband and you just say like, hey, would you recommend me as a wife to someone else?
I don't know. Listen, my husband is definitely not recommending me to somebody else.
No, like on a scale of like 1 to 10. And then he's not sure, like if I say 10, then she's going to be happy but disappointed, It's just never.
It's just so silly. And the people that measure their CSMs on that, that breaks my heart. Because let me tell you something, more often than not, it's product related or support related than it is customer success related. So all these things, they're just broken. They're horrible. And people continue to do it.
Okay. So we're going to go down that road in a second. I just wanted to close on the KPI topic really quickly. So like the things that we measure. So I'm a really big fan in measuring time between steps, right? So like time to value. Now, time to value is getting a little bit tricky in B2B companies as we're starting to go up market. We start to have lower lead times, like the companies are also usually quite slow. They're definitely not as fast as Kristi and Leah. But usually, so for instance, let's say we can measure, at least on our side, hey, here's a request from someone, and the person that is assigned from our side, or like we could resolve, because it's not always like an issue, but like let's say there's a very specific demand for upselling or something that has a kind of defined end, you can actually start to measure the time in between that. And I mean the physical time that we take from our side. That does not mean that we're just going to call the customer and say like, hey, yo, I'm being measured on this metric. You better pick up the phone right now because I want to get this done. I'm just talking about like, how long does it take us on our side to kind of handle these requests for the biggest clients that we have? You can get a little bit into the weeds with this, but like I feel like time to value measurement is so powerful on both sides. Like how long does it take to actually get set up in our product? How long does it take for us to reply and so forth? So time to value, I think, is an underutilized measure in general. Because it's usually, in my opinion, it actually kind of works.
So I like it. I think the only challenge I have with that is if it is one size fits all. And let me explain. So we created this thing called a success probability score. And so basically what I've done is I score my customers on who they are when they are in the partnership. So let me explain. So we've got like 11 points of criteria. I look at things like, are you a first-time CS leader? Do you already have a predefined process? Do you have access to a CRM with accurate, clean, and current data? Do you have an operations team? Do you have more than X amount of people on the team? Do you report to the CEO or somebody else in the organization? So all these things are binary yes or no things. They all have a different scaled weighting. Customers who have a lower score, it's not that they cannot be successful, but the amount of time and resources it will take them to be successful is going to be a lot longer than a customer who has a higher rating, right? Because then it tells me who they are, where they are in their journey, and their ability to adopt our solution strategically into their business. I know these things about them. So I also know that a customer with a lower score, longer time to value. Customer with a higher score, shorter time to value. So I also make sure that the bands in which I'm measuring my customers against actually correspond to who they are, and also not some arbitrary customer segmentation that is totally based on ARR, because that's also bullshit. And people that continue to put their customers in buckets based on how much they spend, it tells you nothing about them or what they need. Can we stop doing that?
This is just such a sales way to go through life. Look, I mean, these are the people that spend a lot. These are the people that give us medium, and these are the people that give us small. And then the product people are looking at this, and they're just like, oh, that's very interesting, Gary. I don't know what that means for the product. I have no idea. So
doesn't mean anything for our customers. I'll tell you that.
No, true. So I think what you're talking about, and I'm very passionate about this topic, is like we talk about the ICPs, right? So like ideal customer profiles. So like who is the person that gets the most value out of us, where we can get also the most value out of them at the same time. These definitions, in my opinion, should be cross-functional, the same. Sales has to use the same ones, product has to use the same ones, customer success, and so forth. And these definitions cannot be by size, right? Yet every company that I work with usually has large, medium, small, and so forth, because that's the sales way. Because for sales, this kind of works.
Like, let's just be honest. It's easy because you can see it and it's a number and it's easy to bucket. When you enter in any layers of complexity, all of a sudden it changes things and nobody wants to do things the hard way. So they do it the easy way. The easy way is often the wrong way. So I don't know.
That's true. But I also think that, like this comes from data enrichment, because these are things that are relatively easy to measure. Like, what is the size of the company? How much revenue do they make? How many employees do they have? This is all important for sales. I'm not knocking on this. This makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, you can describe the size of a company by describing their use case at the same time. So for instance, has to file an IRS report so-and-so per year, or whatever, like if you're like a tax product or whatever, you're already implying the size a little bit in this, right? Or like has multinational kind of, like they have a global team of like 4 different like legal entities and so forth. That's not a company with 4 people, automatically not, of course, right? But this helps already to say like, hey, product, like we're focusing right now on the American market. This is the distribution that we have and so forth and so forth. So like, I'm absolutely with you. But let's say now the CEO comes around the corner and says like, Kristi, this is all amazing. This is so good. Like we're going to do all of what you just said. This is really good. But how do we measure customer happiness then? Because you don't like the NPS. Correct answer, by the way. You do not like health scores.
I don't measure customer happiness because I don't really care if my customer is happy. I do care if they're getting value. So I am going to look at their goal, right? Are they getting value from it? Because that's easy. And if they're engaged, I won't say that they're happy, but an engaged customer in the partnership is going to tell me more about where our partnership stands than a customer who's not engaged. And guess what? Engagement doesn't always have to look good. A customer who responds, and I will say there is some value to NPS, so let me not completely shit on it.
Oh, no. You started so well.
Sorry. A customer who responds to an NPS actually says more about where we are in the partnership than a customer that doesn't respond at all. A customer who doesn't respond at all, like they're completely like, they don't give a shit about us. They're like, who, what, why? I'm not giving you a second more of my time. But a customer who takes a few minutes to say, I'm giving you a 3, and here's a paragraph of where you're failing me, it is at least a cry for help. So to me, I do look at it because it tells me something about customer engagement, and it at least gives me a path to mitigate something, right? I can do something with that. I can't do anything if you don't tell me anything. So engagement tells me a little bit more, and their value realization. Those 2 things are more important to me than happy. Happy also is a fleeting feeling. I don't know. It's like it's like a unicorn. It's mythological.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah. I remember when I was happy, that was like 10, 15 years ago. Yeah. And with age, it's just like it goes away. Yeah. The hormones just like it's gone. Boom, poof. So I don't disagree, but I think there's also a way to actually measure, at least in parts, specific satisfaction scores with your customers. Also, like, so product engagement is not always, by the way, the correct measure to actually measure happiness, because sometimes we can also make things more complicated and then they're
It's also
more
not
engaged.
value, right? Because two customers could be using your product very differently and also be getting value. I will say happiness. I do look at advocacy. So we do track that. So if my customers are willing to be a reference, if they're willing to speak at our events, if they're willing to go and be part of our beta programs, if they are willing to be on an executive advisory board, participate in some richness program that has added value for us, that does tell me about where we stand with them.
Okay, fair enough. But you also need to be able to measure this, right? And a measure in the sense of like, again, we want to surface it, right? Like, so this is the revenue that is at risk. Like, these people are unhappy and these people are not so, or these are people are happy, whatever. So having said that, I like when I have tooling that has different particular features inside of them, right? So like, let's say, I don't know, like your product is a collection of 4 major features, right? So like major things, whatever. Issue that I have mostly with the NPS, and yes, it is a garbage metric. Absolutely, 100%, no redemption. But I contend to you a little bit that there's maybe 1% of use for it. Like, oh, this person, we need to intervene. But if you have 4 kind of main features or like 4 main values in the product, and that's very possible. So let's take a product like HubSpot that has like 5 different suits. If you have people who are responsible for the entire suite and they give you different ratings for different parts of these products. So like, let's say we have these 5 and we can collect a very simple question like, how easy was this for you? Or like, how happy are you with this particular solution in the past? So never ask like, would you recommend it? This is a garbage question. This question is so stupid. Like, also,
have you ever been at a cocktail party where you were talking about software, the B2B software that you use, and you were like, hey, you really need to use this. I've been thinking about it all day. And I really just, when I saw you tonight, I just really wanted to recommend this product to you.
Yeah, if they do not bring HubSpot up on the first date, it's over. Like, this is like, no, I'm a romantic like this. If I don't hear HubSpot or Salesforce as one of the topics, it's just over. Anyways, but the thing is, so because if you then ask, then you can actually compare internally, because it's the same person that gave you specific ratings over time also sometimes, right? Like, we need to keep this very, very simple. So then you can compare, like, why do they not love this particular part of the solution? When this is also one of the main reasons why they're actually in the product, right? So like, if we can start to map, like, oh, this is an actual critical feature for them. So this might actually contribute now to the negative Kristi health score, or like, what did you call it? The SPS, the service, the what was it?
My probability score?
The probability score, yes, SPS is the abbreviation. Then that can make a lot of sense. But this now goes again to your point of like, how do we make this stuff accessible to customer success people? Because just like unlocking a dashboard inside of Metabase doesn't help you, because customer success people talk with individuals and product people are analyzing groups of people very, very commonly. This is something where I feel like we have long ways to go to just like make this stuff available to each other. I don't have the perfect solution yet, but I can definitely tell you that I like working with customer success more than with sales, because they're just closer, like aligned in these goals. Whereas with sales, you have to steer everything through the incentivization plan. And then they think for like 2 weeks, like, how can I abuse this?
I will say, listen, I think the challenge with any of these things that we're talking about when it comes to like collecting this kind of feedback or sentiment from customers is the scientifically relevant sample sizes that we're working with. If you have a small customer base, let's say you have 100 customers and 10 of your customers respond to this, is that data enough to go and decide to do this or that? Listen, these things can all be debated, right? But it's where it becomes a challenge. So I think it's also just important. Do we have enough data that actually says that this is what we should be doing, or this is a real problem to address, or is this an anomaly, right? Or is this, 10 people who shouldn't be customers anyway feeling a certain particular way? Who knows?
Yeah, this is such a good point. And I think I try to always use this term being data-driven versus data-informed. Like, I just don't like being data-driven, because sometimes you will not find specific data that is, as you said, statistically significant, specifically in B2B enterprise markets or mid-markets even, to test anything except like maybe the top of funnel, because you have a little bit people over there and so forth. So, some things you can absolutely go forward with sentiment, but exactly in these places, like showcasing a customer that is very valuable, just completely blowing up on video in an all hands can move roadmaps, in my experience.
There is power to that.
100%. Yeah. When they're throwing the shit around, like on camera, this is exactly what
I will say one of my favorite tools out there is Full Story. If folks aren't using it, but like the ability to see how your customers are using your product or what they're doing when they're in there, it's always wild to me. Cause I'm always like, go click on the button, go do that thing. And like, you're watching them struggle, either navigating your product or you're watching the experience they had. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, shit, that sucks. We built that, huh? And it's like, you have this ability, like you really think it's like the best product ever and it's so intuitive. Sometimes we're too close to these things. And then you watch how someone else is actually using it or engaging with it. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's not good.
We spend so much money on content editors and content creators for the Instagram generation. Maybe we should have a content editor internally that does nothing else than just cutting together user interviews or customer feedback where they just lose their shit and just cuts them together with memes and everything. I am not shitting. I'm actually thinking this could actually drive revenue in some weird way that you would not expect it. Maybe we have to get to that point first.
Listen, it's like all these brands doing crazy stuff on TikTok. I think the latest one now is like Nutter Butter. Everyone's like going crazy for the Nutter Butter TikTok. Wendy's had a crazy Twitter account. Like, these kids are doing some wild stuff on the internet. But it's the weird, outlandish stuff that you think like won't work, generates so much engagement and so many views and things like that. I don't know. You could be onto something.
I'm really talking about internally, like we're just producing this for like all hands meetings, like really just internally. That's the only thing. Like, hey, look, here's a very important customer. I could not sleep for 3 days, but now we cut it together for you as a meme. So you're going to pay attention, right? And then like, oh, look.
That's actually genius.
Thank you very much. Yes, we should do that.
Don't tell anybody that idea. Don't tell anybody. Okay.
Yeah, we're not keeping this into the podcast. Kristi, we have been going on for 500,000 minutes plus minus. Is there any way that people should get in contact with you? If so, how should they do it?
Okay, 2 easy ways to find me. One would be on LinkedIn. You can go check me out, Kristi Faltorusso. You should find my profile right away. I think I'm the only Kristi Faltorusso out there. And if you'd like to get more information, you can go over to my website, which is just KristiFaltorusso.com.
It will be in the show notes. And I highly recommend also your LinkedIn profile because you're also posting quite a lot, as every customer success person should do. I'm also a little bit noisy. It's fine. This is great. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. And it was a fantastic conversation. That's it. We're done.
Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
Boom. Thank you so much for listening to The Productivity with Leah. If you don't have enough yet, you can subscribe to my podcast right now at Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or you can head to my website, leahtarin.com, which is leahtarin.com, where you can find much more of my material or just want to work with me.